pledge allegiance to the flag and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Father God, thank you so much for the community we have an opportunity to live in. We ask for your continued hand of protection upon our police, fire, service, administration, and our school district. We ask this in your son's name. Amen.
Ms. Raleigh, roll call, please.
Mr. Smolik,
Here.
Ms. Simons, Mr. Ziegler,
Here.
Mr. Fenstermaker,
Here.
Ms. Grazia,
Here.
Mr. Hamer,
Here.
Mr. Schulz.
Here. Okay, public hearing on the application for zoning map amendment, 9501 Chillicothe Road. Mr. Leatherhouse,
So the way this would work is we would have Ms. Raleigh read the notice and then have the applicant speak and present to council. Once that happens, there can be questions asked of council to the applicant. Then you would have ask the applicant to sit down. And at that point, you can have residents or people in the audience would have the opportunity to speak in favor of. Those would have the opportunity to speak against. And then the applicant would have another opportunity to speak at that point, and then you could close the hearing.
Okay. Now, that's not on as an ordinance or anything like that.
No, it is not on it as an ordinance.
Okay, so first,
There could be an action that needs to be taken by council at the close of the public hearing. There'd be a vote to either pass it and authorize the rezone or decline the rezone.
okay,
If
And by passing.
council were to pass the rezone, then at the next meeting, there would be legislation on the agenda to send it to the Board of Elections.
okay. And that any sort of change is put to the voters and needs 55%, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so we need to open it up to the people who are putting it up then?
Yes. First, I would ask Ms. Raleigh to read the notice.
Kirtland City Council will hold a public hearing at its regular meeting on Monday, April 15th, 2024 at 7:00 p.m. at the Kirtland Municipal Center, 9301 Chillicothe Road, Kirtland, Ohio, in regard to an application submitted by Andrew Pisorn for a zoning map amendment for property located at 9501 Chillicothe Road in the city of Kirtland. After review and public hearing, the Planning and Zoning Commission has recommended to City Council approval with modifications of the rezoning of parcel numbers 20A0140000070, 20A0140000350, and 20A0140000360 from R2A 1 and 2 Family Residential District to R1 1 and 2 Family Residential District. Opportunity to be heard will be afforded to any interested person. A copy of the proposed amendment and the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission are available for review at City Hall in the office of the Clerk of Council during regular business hours.
And are the property owner? Well, how are you today? State your name, address, please.
Andrew Pichorn, 3774 Judy Drive, Syracuse, New York. Hi, everybody. Hi, folks. Syracuse, New York is where I reside with my wife. I grew up on this property, and my parents and sister reside on this property currently, so it's our family property. This is step, I don't know, 5 or 6 in a long process. So some of us have met on this several times. Some of us, this is our first meeting. We purchased this property. My father purchased this property in 1995. We moved here from one of the Cleveland suburbs and took up residence here. And My sisters graduated from Kirtland High School. I graduated from Kirtland High School, and we still reside here. Regardless of what happens with this development, the plan is to continue to reside here. So I think that's important. My folks and my sister, and we're all Kirtlanders. I happen to live far away, but there is a family future in Kirtland, and I want that to be known. We're not a developer coming in and developing this and then leaving town. We care about what happens with it. It's currently zoned R2A, as was said. That basically means 1 acre minimums. I believe that runs pretty hand in hand with septic systems. So a kind of key part to this request for rezone. We are requesting that be rezoned to R1, which I believe is around a 12,000 square foot minimum, just say quarter acre, I think is what was loosely said by the zoning commission. The project, so kind of what we envision this project, and this comes from about a year now of discussions with the zoning board, with the mayor, city engineer, reading through some of the publicated commissions and the plan that was put together by the city and then updated. What we envision this development being is a quality, low-maintenance development, a walkable community. So there's some details, and I'll try to stay brief and then maybe air some of this out if people have questions. And our target population for this development would be the aging population of Kirtland. I think that's important. So Kirtland has an aging population. I'm sure all of you are aware of that. Statistically, by state, by county, the city has one of the more aging communities in the state. And we would love to see this community be an opportunity for those folks who are in Kirtland and getting older, who maybe raise their families here, to have a place to go in the community, to still stay in Kirtland, but have a smaller lot, a little less maintenance maybe. A big part of that is having access to sewer, and so I'll get into that in a little bit. We do plan on, if this were to go through, we've been in touch with, and our goal in staying with kind of that Kirtland theme is utilizing local builders. So I also want to make it clear that we don't plan on bringing in a regional or a large national builder to build this out. We plan on utilizing potentially a few local builders. I don't know that there's a local builder that would want to take all this on, which is fine. And we potentially give a few, partner with a few builders to tackle a project like this. Like I said earlier, we would retain some lots and plan on building in the neighborhood. So we would stay in the neighborhood. The Bishorns would stay in the neighborhood. Some added benefits that I think this project could generate. I think it's a pretty good opportunity for the city as far as it being a revenue generator. So I know the last council meeting, I joined in via the camera because I was in New York, but you talked a lot about finance and kind of where things are at and planning for the future. This doesn't solve all of the challenges, but I think it's an opportunity to present a low maintenance, low cost development with a high upside on revenue. And some of that has to do with the amount of road, the amount of maintenance that would be required per taxable property. So it's a pretty good equation, I think, for the city in that regard. About half of the property to the west is currently forest. That property will stay natural forest. So, and I'll pull up a map or some schematics here in a second, but essentially half of the property becomes pretty difficult to access because of this ravine, somewhat the same ravine that's behind the property here. The back of that would all stay forest. Moving forward with this project kind of locks that in, that it will remain forest. gives everybody some opportunity. We're not exactly sure what we're going to do with that forested chunk yet. And we do want to talk to the parks, see if it's something that they would like, and maybe work with them, obviously talk to the city, or retain it, as the back lots on the property could potentially just retain some of that forested area as well. Sewer extension. So a big question might be how do you address this zoning request? These lots obviously wouldn't be sized to handle septic and leach field. And the answer there is that we, our family would work to extend the sewer south on 306. Pardon me, I get a dry mouth when I'm nervous. We would extend that sewer south towards Route 6. It's about 1,550, maybe 1,600 feet. And Doug can speak to that, but I think it's about 1,600 feet of extension that we would put in to tie this neighborhood into the existing gravity sewer that runs through right in front of the building we're in right now. Just to give an idea, and I'll present a little drawing here, but just to give an idea of the density and the type of neighborhood that we're looking at, the road directly to, and the properties directly to the north of this property are a good reference. There's a little bit of diversity there. There are some lots that are approaching half acre in the Templeview development, but there are also quite a few lots that are much smaller. These lots would approach a third acre. So a little bit bigger than some of the smaller lots in the Templeview development. So a little more spread out than that, but just as kind of a reference. But this development, the current design and the requirements and what's on the books is that this would have sidewalk. It would have a community post area, which is required, a mailbox, community mailbox area. So we definitely see this as a neighborhood. And I'll pull up the drawings now, but to give everyone up here an idea, and these are here for anyone to see, but it's a U shape, a horseshoe shape, off of 306 with two entrances and exits. That the Templeview neighborhood that I was talking about is directly to the north. So it's these homes here, which I'll show you on the next.
How many acres are we talking about, and how many homes are you looking at in there projected?
We're talking about, I think it's about 15 acres would be this part, and it's 30 new homes are what's projected.
Mr. Pashorn, from that schematic on the right, there seems to be an existing house that remains, and that's part of the family home. Is that how that's depicted? Is that my understanding is correct?
No. There is, you're right on a lot of, let me just clarify one thing. There is an existing house that would potentially stay. Doesn't necessarily have to, but it fits into the plan as far as location and access to the road. That house is not a family home. So that house would just stay based on where it's at and would stay in our ownership. But it's not the house that we reside in, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Lot 17. There's an existing building there that would stay, potentially. It's designed there. And really only designed that way because it fits in with where it's at.
Is that currently occupied?
That is currently occupied, yep. And then this drawing shows that it's to the north, and you can see some of the densities, varying densities, and how they look. Just to give you kind of a scale perspective.
You can spin those around so the public can see them.
Yeah.
Good. I think you guys are really good here.
We have email too.
Yeah.
All you can see design as it stands today. Some reference to the neighborhood. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
One last question, sir. You mentioned a walkable community. I did see in the documents the council received sidewalk on either side of the street in the horseshoe. Relative to your work in placing a sewer, if this were to go through, would there be a commitment on your behalf to trying to connect to that sidewalk? in Charles area, Russellhurst area, just to make that final connection?
Yeah, it's definitely something we would consider for sure. One, to tie into that walkable idea, and to your question, absolutely, if we're restoring, we might as well restore better. And if the city deems that sidewalk is better, restoring above the sewer that gets installed. Definitely something we'd consider. There are some logistics questions with the city engineer and the city in terms of which side, how that would work best for the city. But yes, definitely something that we would consider to tie it all in. Right now on the west side of the road, I believe Barrister's Court is where the sidewalks end. Does anyone live on Barrister's Court? Yeah, sidewalks come from downtown. On the east side, I'm not really sure if they go to Temple View or where
They stop at Temple View right now.
they do. Okay.
Yeah.
So they're very close. So yeah, tying that in would add to the.
Andrew, would this have a homeowners association?
Yes, it would need to. We try to keep it minimal, part of the low maintenance aspect, but the stormwater detention needs it, and the sign would need it, and the shared community post would need it. So there's a few reasons that it has to. Yep.
To be clear, if this does pass and then it passes with the voters, he'll still need to bring this project before the Planning and Zoning Commission to go through the subdivision process. So a lot of the plans you see, it'll have to be further evaluated by, engineer, the city's engineer, if there's water issues and whatnot. There's other things that would still have to take place before they do, shovels in the ground.
Yeah, to that point, I always struggle, but I try to say like conceptual plan or something, because there are things that the zoning folks and could want to change. So yes, absolutely. If you're looking for me to close it, in essence, that's the idea. Again, the target would be the aging community in Kirtland. The way we would target that is through deed restrictions. We would not seek HUD or any grant money or any 55 and over. This would not be I want to make sure that's clear. I don't want anyone to think this is for a certain age group.
Open to everybody.
It's open to everybody. This would be a trying to foster a community on this property. With that said, the target would be, and the opportunity would be, to retain Kirtlanders who are seeking to downsize. I want to be clear about that. It's not exclusive to 65 and up, but that would be the target.
Not holding you to it, but what kind of price range would you be thinking about around
Yeah.
to that?
Will you be upset if I tell you I don't have a solid answer on that right now? So there's a lot of variables that impact that. One of them is the builders. And so I don't want to answer that question for them. But it would, what I will say is we are proposing a high value, high quality neighborhood. That means local builders, not big box trucks that are going to come and put up 15 houses in 2 months. That's not the goal. The goal is to work with partners here in the community and make something that the community is proud of and that those builders are proud of because they're from here, right? their name's going to be on it.
What projected timeline are you thinking? 3 to 5 years, 5 years, 7? When do you think? Because there's a lot of work, obviously. If the residents agree, to Mr. Lallo's point, there's still a lot of planning that has to go on. So what time frame are you guys looking?
100%. So we'd like to break ground if, again, there are still, this is step 5 or whatever of many, but if it kept going, and I don't want to be naive or disrespectful to anyone, if it keeps going, we'd like to break ground next year, which is potentially doable with the November, if we were on the November ballot, and again, if everything kept passing or passed. We'd like to break ground next year. A takedown schedule for the builders, and I hate to keep deviating, but I really would have to get confirmation from builders, which I don't have right now. I don't have, any written commitments from builders, but I would say 3 years. Also, keep in mind, I'm not targeting one builder necessarily. I don't know that there's one builder that would want to do all this.
Kevin, what would have to go on the ballot? Something would have to go on the ballot? Okay.
55%, about 50 plus 1 is 55.
Correct. All residents.
And we didn't have to vote on anything for the parks because the parks didn't ask for any zoning change, right?
Correct. That was just a
Is that what I'm trying to
subdivision.
understand?
That was just a subdivision. At the last election,
Is this not a subdivision?
but that was already zoned appropriately, so they didn't have to change the zoning of that property. Here, he's looking to rezone this property from,
1 acre to 12,000 square
correct.
feet. Or
Right, so-
R1.
So it's because, so now what could happen feasibly is the property can get rezoned, voters approve it, the property can get rezoned, but it's still got to get approved by Planning and Zoning Commission. Like the project itself has to get approved by Planning and Zoning Commission.
But didn't this get sent up to us from Planning B and Z?
So the way the process works is, there's first a meeting and a hearing with the Planning and Zoning Commission to review the rezone, the application for a rezone. Purely an application to rezone the property, not the project, not the underlying project. Okay? So they review that, and then they offer a recommendation to council. It's purely their recommendation. So now council formally will either say, yes, we agree with Planning and Zoning Commission and authorize the rezone, or we disagree with the rezone of the property. If we agree as council, then according to our charter, there's a mandatory referendum for rezoning, okay? So then if council agrees to rezone the property, then in order for that property to be actually rezoned, it has to go to the voters, and the voters have to approve of it by 55% or more. Okay? And then if they approve of it, then at that point, then he would file an application with the Planning and Zoning Commission for the subdivision. And they would go through that whole process.
That's whether it's roads, sewers, including the build, all that stuff.
Correct.
So if we vote no now, what happens?
It's dead in the water.
If we vote yes, it goes to where?
It goes to the voters.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe.
Mr. Lalla, is there a component to where they could petition residents to get a certain amount of signatures to go to the voters? In this
Yes.
case, I wasn't sure if that existed for a zoning change.
I believe it does. I'd have to pull up our charter and statutes.
Speaking of, if council was to say no, they could go petition to.
Yeah, and I would just add that I don't know if and Mr. Lalla may correct me, and please do if I'm wrong. I don't know if it's council necessarily saying that. Is it council saying that they approve of this zoning change, or is it they approve of the idea that it goes to the voters in November?
The zoning change.
Okay.
And then if council approves of the zoning change, then they have to have legislation to send it off to the Board of Elections, to put it before the Board of Elections. If council does not approve of the zoning change, there's no change that goes to the voters. If that were the case, then the applicant would have the opportunity to do an initiative, which is either a resolution or ordinance that would bring it to the voters. You need 10% of the electors to sign off on it.
Okay. So is that what you were looking up?
Yes.
Okay.
Are we voting tonight?
You can. So you can vote. So once the public hearing closes, then at that point, well, before the public hearing closes, Mr. Pajorn could be presented with an opportunity to table this for another meeting until the next meeting, to basically continue it to the next meeting, or to simply close it and move forward.
Do the residents get to talk after he's done?
Yes.
No.
Tell him, Ron.
Mr. Courtney, relative to the capacity of the sewer and the ability to sell that capacity, that's been looked at on a preliminary engineering level, say we have that capacity for 31 sublots.
That capacity does exist in the 306 sewer, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Council President, is it okay if I take the floor just for a minute? Good to take the floor for a minute myself?
Go right ahead, Mayor.
Okay, so just before we get into the public portion, I want to thank the Pazorns for bringing this investment opportunity to the city of Kirtland. This is undoubtedly, like Mr. Pazorn said, for a lot of years we've been hearing about, you know, where do our folks that are heading into those senior years, and they want to downsize, but yet they want to stay in Kirtland. So I think clearly that's where this motivation comes from, to fit that need. So however this goes, you know, tonight, I think we're going to hear from some of our folks in the public. I want to thank you guys for being willing to take these steps and ask the community, ask a council, ask your neighbors if this is in fact something that the city of Kirtland wants to take a step forward. We know that advancement of our sewers going south is something of priority to the city. But how we do that and what's the balance, that's what's going to be interesting to see here tonight with our local residents. So thanks for the time, thanks for the commitment, the willingness to invest here in the city of Kirtland, and you know, I look forward to a good dialogue here.
Thank you, Mayor.
Can you explain to me how the septic thing would work? Like, people are gonna have to get off-lot systems because these are,
No septic.
you're gonna do septics, is what, sewers?
Into the sewer. He's going to extend it 1,600 feet from the,
Oh, that's definitely gonna happen before this goes in?
It would have to, yeah. So if tonight y'all voted in approval, or if some other, you know, if this were to go through tonight, go through on the ballot and get approved, we would extend the sewer to make this development happen. Without extending the sewer, the development wouldn't happen as is, which would make the rezone request kind of.
and the 1,600 feet of sewer extension is covered by, in the project, and there's no city cost to that, correct?
Yeah, that's a privately funded extension.
If they brought the sewer past a resident who lived on 306,
You would bring it by
would they
one
be,
street.
would they be forced to tie in?
Unless a service lateral is provided for that resident, no.
So if they bring the sewers past, let's say I live on 306, if they bring the sewer past my house and they put a T in, I have to connect. If they don't put a T in, I don't have to connect.
Correct.
The T is at the homeowner's request though, right?
Right, it could be at the homeowner's request.
Right.
If a resident did not want that T installed, then just go past the house. If they wanted it installed because they
Does
knew
it
they were going to
matter?
abandon their septic at some point, they could ask to have that put in.
Does it matter if you're, obviously the sewer now is is it on the west side of the road?
East side.
East side? So if you live on the west side of the road and the sewer comes over and you put a T in, you still have to tie in then?
Correct.
Okay.
How many houses are would be affected by that? You know, a rough number?
Is Barrister's Court the only one that this would theoretically pass by? Streetwise?
Isn't there 3 parcels to the south of Charles Dairy? Is it 2 or 3 parcels that reside there? Or they just took the house down a couple years ago, then they've been clearing that lot?
Is that house they took down part of your property?
No, it's not. Those totally separate owners.
Does your wooded line go to that house? Is that what you're saying? You said there's woods on the north.
No, I'm sorry. If I said north, Wood's on the east.
Oh, on the east?
Yeah, if I said north, I apologize.
I'm not a good
East.
listener.
The property does, I believe, go to that property where they're clearing. There's a bunch of logs out front. I believe that is our first on 306. I think that is the first.
It's, I think, where your detention pond is.
Yeah, right next to that would be the detention. So yeah, yep, that property does butt up against this property.
Do you have any conceptual drawings where the pond is not by the road?
Mr. Hamer, again, that's where, I think this is a very preliminary drawing. If this were to be approved, all of that would be addressed at planning and zoning during that subdivision application process. So they could say, you know what, we prefer not to have a retention basin by the road, or we'd rather have it over here. And they can talk with the applicant at that point to have all of that done.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I think it's important to note that once the project, if it goes through, it's complete, that sewer is then turned over to the city. It's a public sewer at that point in time. You no longer have maintenance or control of that sewer.
Yeah, this would be a public road, so all utilities and road, everything in the right of way would get turned over to the city. Yep. For Mr. Joe.
That's correct. And to answer the question about how many impacted properties, it looks like from a quick count, looks like 11, and 2 are currently vacant.
So the residents that potentially could be impacted, they're going to have an option though. If they choose not to have a T put in, then they're going to stay septic. If they choose to put a T in, how long do they have where they actually have to tie in?
I think that's dependent on health department regulations, and I believe it's a year from the time the sewer is accepted.
And then the next question, let's say 10 years from now, my septic system failed, but I didn't put a T in. They would have to pay for the T getting installed and the connection, so the cost would be much greater.
That's correct.
So if it ran past Barristers, when it runs past Barristers, who decides if Barristers get a T or not?
Barristers, I think that looking at individual properties versus a subdivision is two different scenarios.
That's kind of my question. Are we forcing Barrister to tie in then?
No.
What if one person on Barrister wants to tie in?
Then he'd have to convince the rest of his neighbors to tie in as well.
Or pay the
Then that
entire
would be a
cost of it down
separate,
there.
completely separate project to put a sewer in on Barristers and tie it into the 306 sewer.
So, Mr. Courtney, it can't be something that's mandated. It has to be completely voluntary relative to the subdivision then.
Correct.
And to that, obviously Barristers are passed. Does it go so far as Pinecrest or no? Or, yep, Pinehurst, sorry. Does it go down past there or no? Short of that?
Technically, yes, because the intersection at Pinehurst and 306 is just north of their southerly property line. And the
Okay, so
sewer, when they put the sewer in, it's going to have to go to that southerly property
So
line.
there's two subdivisions, then that would
Correct.
be out this, correct, okay. Thank you.
Did I give you guys a good idea of what we're looking to do?
You did from my perspective, thank you.
Any questions?
I guess point council, any other questions? Then we turn it over to the public after that, I believe, Mr. Lallo?
Correct. And there'll be an opportunity for follow-up
Okay.
after that.
I'll see you guys soon.
Thank you.
You don't go far.
And at this point, I guess we open it up to the public then. So whoever comes up, please state your name and address. Anyone can start off. Crystal?
Jim Viscasilli, 84105-8415 North Locust. Too many O's. Just wondering, what size houses were they talking about? You know, square footage?
I think you said 1,200 square feet. That's
I'm sorry?
12,000 square foot was a lot.
Oh,
Actual house size?
house size, yeah.
I thought you did say, okay.
Yeah, I didn't say anything about the house sizes. I'm glad someone, not 1,200 square feet. I again, and I hate to keep doing this, but I have to kind of shelf that until some conversations happen with builders, and I think that's more of a subdevelopment type question. Quality homes, low maintenance neighborhood. I can't give you answers as far as the sizes of houses. We would create some options for folks, obviously.
Whoever buys
You're
it has the
talking
opportunity.
1, 2, 3-bedroom homes, not 27-bedroom.
Yes, yes. No, we're talking for folks in the neighborhood to downsize into. So keep that in mind, yeah.
What does our ordinance have as a minimum square footage in town? Does anyone know?
Don't believe we, Mr. Courtney, do we have a square footage minimum?
I wish I could give you a better
Minimum
answer.
square footage of the home?
No, it's usually lot size.
Well, I think it's important to note that the change of zoning also sets the sideline requirements. So it's a 5-foot sideline, is that correct?
That'd be a Mr. Courtney question.
Yeah. I think that was in the chart that we may have received.
Oh, going from an
So,
R1 to
you
an
know, you
R2?
can maybe figure out a perimeter,
Gotcha.
you know, else you can get the size. It sets the side yards, the rear yard, and the setback.
So the requested lot widths in this, if this rezone were approved, would be 60 foot. That's
minimum.
right. What we are proposing is 85 foot lot widths.
Min in.
Side setbacks required are 5 foot. What we're proposing are 5 foot with some variation, 5 foot minimums.
Thank you.
If you have more questions, I didn't mean to come up. I just,
You guys can stay right there if you want to. Let's go back and forth.
Take the gum out of my mouth. Hi, I'm Jim Davis. I live at 8120 Glen Park Road. My curiosity is not about the sewers. I know that they'll do what they have to do. It's not about the size of the lots. It's the runoff. It's the water that runs off of 31 lots. And some of them will come this way into those ponds there, but I personally don't think they're adequate. The water that heads east is the one I'm concerned about, because the little stream that runs down there runs into the east branch of Chagrin. If that's not handled in a proper way, we're going to have a real problem with erosion and runoff, and we'll end up having part of our city in the Lake Erie. And we don't really want that. That's the only concern I have, really, is how is this runoff going to be adequately controlled?
Mr. Davis, Mr. Courtney probably could answer that, but that generally goes through the P&Z process, and they look at all that water flow, I believe, correct?
That's correct. We'll review a full stormwater management plan that's submitted by the applicant if we get to that point in the process. But that'll be part of what their full plan submission includes, and the city regulates that stuff pretty heavily, so.
Good. Okay. That was it.
Take your time, no hurry.
Martha Stankwitz, 7981 Pinehurst Drive. In his note, we live on Pinehurst, and I'm at kind of the bottom of the hill in Pinehurst. I've had so much water and flooding in our backyard, it's been unbelievable. Last year, we spent $10,000 just putting in pipes in, and we did it about 8 years ago, too. They weren't big enough, so we had to enlarge it. So that is a big concern of mine, and we said the city's really on it. I don't think so. Because nobody took care of us. We had to do this. Because all the water comes from 306 down. There's a lot of water that comes through. And that's a concern of mine too. I didn't think of it before, but thank you for bringing it up. You already spend so much money in our backyard. It's unbelievable because all the water runs in. And we thought when the people on 306 put a pool in, it kind of stopped for a little bit. It didn't. I thought maybe that would stop it a bit, but it didn't.
Do we know where the stormwater retention will drain? I mean, it goes to the pond. It goes to the pond, and then will it go down 306? Do we know?
It will discharge to 306. The front pond will, the back pond will discharge to the stream in the back.
One other thing is, I mentioned it already at the zoning committee that, we moved into Kirtland we bought our lot 28 years ago, knowing that there are going to be acre lots allowed in Kirtland. And to have something like this, even trying to get out of Pinehurst right now is very difficult. Now you're looking at 30 houses, maybe times 2 cars, that's another 60 cars coming out of that street. That's just going to make it more difficult. So what would the city do to kind of alleviate that traffic for us to be able to get out?
I was at a couple of P and Z meetings, and I know lights were brought up, but that, I think you need studies for that by way of any. And also, I know where you're at Pine Creek. Unfortunately, you got that little hill that comes from running north. That's a little hard to see over there sometimes too. And that's more the speeding. They're going from 40 to 20 or 30 over there too.
Mr. Courtney, isn't it a requirement that came out of planning and zoning to look at a traffic impact study?
Yes, yes, and Mr. Pashorn has already started that process.
I believe it was a recommendation, if I'm not
Not a
mistaken.
requirement.
Correct.
Whether it was a requirement or recommendation, Mr. Pashorn has already started that process. So.
Hi, my name is Karen DeMarco. I live at 7999 Pinehurst Drive. I have a couple of concerns, a couple duplicates of what people have already said. But they're just concerns which I hope you guys would really consider before making your decision. The first one is safety. Now, the 2 entrances onto 306 is, in my mind, would be very dangerous because right there is the hill, which we cannot see over. The one entrance will be visible to us, but I could foresee people, because that traffic line will be heavy at certain times of the day. And when they can take a break and they'll get out, I could see cars going in each direction and, running into each other possibly. But the other one looks like it's on above the hill, which is something that is dangerous for us right now because the speed limit's 25 and then all of a sudden it changes to 35 and then people step on it when they're heading south. So they come flying over that hill and you don't know that they're coming until the last second when we're pulling out. So that is a major concern, along with the congestion of adding, like Martha said, at least 60 cars in that tiny area. So those are real concerns I have. The second one is that it really would set a precedent if we do pass this for future development in Kirtland. I think we all moved here for the reasons because it's 1 acre minimum, it's beautiful, open spaces, rural feel, yet you have a community. You're still close to your neighbors. If we wanted something such high density, we would have moved to Menor or stayed in Menor. So I really feel like if we start doing this, we're going to go down a road and turn this community into something that it would be a shame because Kirtland is unique because of its beauty. So I have no problem with developing it according to our current zoning, 1 acre minimums. And we've seen over the past, I've been here almost 30 years, developments put in Kirtland that have maintained the beauty that we have. We have right here, it was Barristers, Pinehurst was first, then Barristers, then Alpine Rose, Regency, Rocking Horse. They still have the community feel, but it's still open and nice, and you can enjoy nature and everything that makes Kirtland unique. So I don't understand why we make an exception for this development when everybody else follows the zoning place. And that's why, as Martha said, we moved here, 1 acre minimums, great, that's the minimum. Then it was 3 and 5 acres some places. So we thought it'd be wonderful to raise our family here in this beautiful place. So it might be because he can bring the sewers down, but I have a question about that because I know the developer of Alpine Rose wanted sewers down there a few years back when he was developing it, and he was going to maintain 1 acre minimum. But he was told no, because the city was reserving the extra capacity for future developments for the whole community. So I question why that changed, why we don't want to maybe still save it for something. We might not have plans for it now, but who knows what the future will bring. So I would really question that, why we can put the sewers in now, but however many years ago they couldn't on Alpine Rose. And what else do I want to say? So I told you about the, okay, hold on. Recently, I was walking behind here and I walked over to where the Halley Estate was and read the plaques where the remains of it is. And it said how the family escaped the city life in the summer to enjoy the beauty that, you know, this area offered. And it got me to thinking that is exactly why we love here, like it here, because when you get out the freeway, you come from downtown after work, or you come from, like, I know my kids, as soon as they come home from Ohio State and we turn down and start heading down that hill, they're like, oh, it's so nice to be home because it's just green and wide open and you don't have that city feel. It'd be a lot different if we start doing this kind of stuff. It'll be just like we're turning left heading into Menor. You know what I'm saying? It's just going to kind of look the same. So I kind of would just like to close by saying that you guys are stewards of our community, that we've voted to guide our community in the right direction, to preserve it the way it is and keep it, you know, the beautiful place it is by encouraging development that leads us in that direction. So I think that's all. I had no problem with it developing, just keep it an acre minimum. Thank you. Thank you.
Name and address, please.
Hi there. Chad McFadden. I'm at 9655 Woodcroft Court in the Pinehurst Development. I just want to echo what Karen's saying. It is extremely congested pulling it out of there. And in adding these 60 plus cars is going to really contribute to that. And echoing that is, I don't know, and I'm not against growth. I want growth. I just don't know that I want downsizing so close to my house in growth and more population in that area at a smaller size. So what's that going to do to our home values that we've invested into the city of Kirtland? And, you know, just bringing that, you look at a Barrister, a Pinehurst, Alpenrose, that's really what Kirtland's about. And I think Kirtland needs more of that. I mean, I think Sue could probably attest, there's not a house for sale in Kirtland, so we need houses, you know, growth. But I don't know that we need it at this size. So getting an acre lot, I'm all for it. Build it, develop it, and make it right, and maybe limit that congestion, and grow the community, which I think is outstanding. And I applaud you guys for wanting to do that. And then I also think that the drainage problem is a major issue. So my house backs to the corner of 306 in the Pinehurst development. All the water from Alpenrose, 306, comes straight down into my backyard to the point where it is knee high. So if you're going to add more water here, that's going to continue to bottleneck that up. And I think you guys have both been out, you've been out of my house. So, you know, and you've cleared every pipe possible to help it. And you sold me the place. It's going to kill me. So there's a ravine there. I don't know if there's an opportunity for a retention pond, you know, back in that area to kind of help that area. But putting more water and more of this into that deal, it's really going to impact us there in Pinehurst. So I applaud the growth. I'm for it. I'm not for it at that size and that many homes right across the street from us. So take that into consideration. I mean, our homes have substantially increased in value. I want to continue that because I want to be here for a long time. I don't know that this is going to help that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Courtney, when you mentioned that it's going to drain into the sewer system, that you're talking about the closed sewer system, or are you talking about draining into a culvert that's taking it to a stream or a nearby creek?
For storm sewer discharge?
Yes.
I am not familiar with the storm sewer system on that portion of 306, so there's storm sewers up there, Joe? So discharge to the storm sewer in 306, and this particular property is downhill from Woodcroft, so none of this water would make it back that way.
I don't think that's true. Because, I mean, all that water is, if you're going to add more water there, why would that not back up the 306?
The sewers that this would discharge to go north.
You would put an additional sewer up toward?
No, the existing storm sewers in 306.
It's not. It's coming by. And I think I'm getting a lot of the off-roads discharge coming around.
Joe and I will look into that, and again, when final development plans come in, all that will be looked at very closely.
It's a geyser coming out of my front yard. It's so much water.
Evening, sir.
My name is Joe Koser. I live in 7967 Pinehurst. I've been there 26 years. In all due respect, they're my friends, and making money is a good thing. Okay, and this is fine. However, what they're proposing here is more like a little bit of Euclid. Right now, they're talking about it's going to be for older folks, but you never know what's going to happen down the road. The whole property, I live in Pinehurst, I think it's going to be developed eventually. So you may make more money this time, but eventually the whole property is going to go down. So you're not going to make money in the long run. So I'm opposed to any rezoning, this rezoning as well as any other rezoning from 1 acre down. I don't think it's just right. Kirtland should be what it is, beauty, right? And I echo Karen and Josh over here. So that's what I want to say. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Goger.
Okay. Oh, by the way, I also want to say one more thing. You're talking about water, again, front of the house and the back of the house. Again, from both sides, all the runoff.
Hi, Susie Schaefer, 7992 Barristers Court. Beautiful project. I do really like it. I would like us to keep the minimums of the 1 acre. It's already hard to turn left out of Barristers in the morning just to get the kids to school. I can't imagine what it's going to be with an additional 60 cars approximately across the way. Additionally, I am concerned about the property value and how it might have a negative impact. And then finally, now I'm starting to question if all of the wet side yards that we have is because we are the first house on Barristers, and if it's related at all with this 306 runoff. Because Stankwitz is our neighbors behind us. And so yes, please take a look at that, Mr. Courtney, because we do struggle with a very wet side yard all of the time. It's like, it's squishy like the community center. So
Take a look.
that's all I got. Oh, wait. If you do put it in and you do run sewer, if you hopefully get approved at the 1 acre size, I do know that from a barrister standpoint, I think I heard you say it's all or nothing on a HOA has to vote to be into it versus just one house tying in.
That's correct, because it would require a sewer on Barrister's Court.
Okay. Thank you.
Jeff Belsarsky, 7685 Hidden Valley Drive. My neighborhood is a 2 acre minimum lot. And I imagine possibly that there was the same sort of debate about 1 acre minimum lots and how they might take away the community or the character of the community. So I think it's important to consider that the character of the community is not the size of the lot. It's the fit of the community itself. I think if we ask people that lived in Old Town who have significantly less than 1 acre lots, they would argue that the character is in the community, not in the size of their lots. So I would say that it's much more important to consider carefully planned, deliberate development that expands the character that we all care about in Kirtland, rather than necessarily the minimum size of the lots. I think it's all of the other considerations, the traffic considerations, the drainage, the engineering, those are all technical problems that can be solved. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mary Sams, 9120 Prelog Lane. I just have a question. Is there any idea of what these homes will cost?
That was discussed a little earlier. They're not quite sure.
Price range?
100 to 800,000. I'm just joking. I really don't want to commit to any kind of number. Hate to leave you with that. But that's what I mean.
Okay, my concern here is if council approves this tonight, is there any way that this can still change from 30-some lots maybe down to 20? Or is it going to stay at 30 lots? Because I've seen this before. The housing is more affordable. I'd love to have a place for our seniors to downsize. I think they would love to stay in Kirtland and they need a place. But what I've seen is that if they are reasonably priced, people will buy them and they will become landlords. And that's my fear, is that these will now become rentals. And we know how people who are tenants don't care about the property as a homeowner. That's my concern. So if you guys all vote that this is okay tonight, can this still change as far as lot size, or does it stay this way?
I would guess if council voted for it, they would keep it at 30 houses, I would imagine.
Well, it can still change, as Mr. Bajorn noted. The frontage right now is 80 feet, correct? 85 feet? Okay. So the minimum in R1 is 60 feet. So really, if they wanted to, they could fit as many as they can within that 60-foot frontage. But also it has to be approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission during that subdivision application process. So feasibly, if they wanted to, they could put more houses on here. This project right here, as you see it on that depiction, may not necessarily be, if everything passes, it may not necessarily be what the final project is, because they still have to go through the planning and zoning process. And, so it could go one of two ways in that regard. One, they could put more houses in, or two, they could take some houses out and reduce that density. Now, I know for developers, they have to have that delicate battle or that balance of where their break-even point is in making money. So that I don't know the answer to that one, but that's something that they will be dealing with if everything passes. But as it stands right now, the vote from council, and then if they approve, then the vote from the people is going to be, should this property be rezoned to R1? That's it. And then if it gets approved, then the next question is how many homes, what's it going to look like, and all of that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
We just give one opportunity to speak. I just think it would make way more sense if it was one road with full acre lots. I think that would, everybody here would be like, let's go. So having the two roads, the traffic's an issue, the smaller size and the smaller homes. So I think one road, full acre lots would be.
Sir, that is one of my questions. Because if you look at an overhead, it's fairly similar community to the Glen Park, Charles Dairy, North Star. If you look at an overhead, and that does have the one, it kind of goes down and splits off. Obviously, you've probably been down that, growing up over there. Is that feasible at all? Obviously, that kind of changes the plan a bit on that. Or was there an alternate ever looked at by way of that?
Like, would one way in, one way out be beneficial?
Oh, you're going to go ahead and answer if you'd like to. Go right ahead, sir.
So to your first question, I think we feel that this is the most effective use of the land as far as pavement to lot distribution. To your question about one-way traffic, I don't have an answer to that. Whether that's this is per city regulation, the way that this is designed, the road. I don't know, and maybe Dusty, can you speak at all to one-way traffic? I don't know if does the city, and I don't know, Doug, I don't want to put you on the spot, but does the city have any,
That's something we
Put
would
into
have to
that.
look at a little more closely. but-
yeah. So I don't think one-way traffic has been addressed at this point. And I hope I answered those two questions.
Excuse me, sir, I have a question. So I don't know if you can speak to this. How many 1 acre lots could fit with some of the preliminary design you did? And then how many lots would fit if it was a 60-foot frontage that is the minimum requirement that zoning allows for?
Dusty's standing up, so I'll let him.
Dusty, before you answer, can you name it?
Sure. Dustin Keeney with Polaris Engineering and Surveying, 34600 Chardon Road, Willoughby Hills, 44094. And honestly, in addition to the width, I don't know that the density honestly would change much because we have to maintain the minimum, so right now the lots are 85 feet by 140, which gives you the minimum square footage. If they got narrower to 60 feet, they'd have to get deeper. So when it's all said and done and you start playing with the layouts, the density really doesn't change. And just a couple of things that this layout, and I know we're getting way into the weeds on layouts, and this is more about the zoning, but, we're trying to not, create dead ends, some of those different things for fire safety and access and circulation and all of those things. But from a density perspective, I really don't know that if we were to mess with this, we could come back and we could get more than the 31 lots that were shown. It would look different, but I think the density is going to be really close to that number.
Okay. It's because of the ratio. You're tied to
Correct.
12,600 feet
Yes,
in total.
right.
Thank you. But back to the 1 acre question, how many 1 acre lots do you think that could hold if it was just a cul-de-sac?
I'm guessing by the time you do with septic and you're probably looking at 10.
Thank you.
May I ask?
Go right ahead.
I know you mentioned you don't have a size for the house. I know as our developer for our neighborhood gave us a minimum was 2,600. So it's something you can't have a standard. Sorry, I know you can actually, you don't have to wait for the builders to tell you. You can make a decision of what size house it'll be there, and I think it'll make it easier for all of us to kind of visualize that too, because like we said, in our development, it had to be at least 2,600.
Go right ahead, sir.
I'm not sure the process, if I'm supposed to write these down and answer them at the end. So, Marta, yeah, Mrs. Stankwitz, sorry. Deed restrictions are definitely something that we are going to put in place. So to answer that question, someone mentioned of concern with this becoming a rental. I don't want to answer. I have a lot of these things. I'm trying to keep notes. Y'all giving really good input. I appreciate it all. I'll try to give some feedback. So deed restrictions are a yes. I don't have that in my head. I don't have that number right now. And to what a lot of the discussion has been, I would push, and you all can tell me if I'm correct or not, but a lot of that comes down to subdivision approval. As far as the size of houses, the deed restrictions within the subdevelopment, or in the subdivision, not so much the rezone question. So I'm not trying to get around your answer, but we will do that. I just don't have it at this point. And rental, the concern of these becoming rentals, and the price point question, just because I think it kind of goes hand in hand with this. Deed restrictions will be put in place, and the value of these homes is targeted to that they will never become rentals, and we can control that, to Mrs. Stankwitz's point. And just to carry on, we would hope and envision this as a boost to property values by utilizing those tools that are in place to make sure these are high value homes. So I hope that answers some of the questions.
You said you wanted to start with as a downsized community. Then
So were there any more questions from the public? So if other folks, because I don't want to just answer everything.
Yeah, why don't you take a seat, take your notes, and then and then what we'll do is once everyone's done talking, then we'll
really tough, so I can't hear you unless you're talking into the microphone. Thank you.
Name and address, sir.
Dave Canola, and I live on 8136 Glen Park. And yeah, I don't know if you folks are familiar with the topography of that area that they're talking about building on, but it's pretty steep ravines. You know, if you've ever walked the trails down, you know, from Penitentiary Glen, then you get some kind of idea of the steepness and to bring into the fact of the water drainage problem. But there's a creek that runs there. It's a small fork that runs to the east branch of the Chagrin River, and when it rains, it turns into a little river. And I don't know why they're doing the construction over there on 306, but I imagine there's some erosion underneath the road there from where the river goes underneath there. And if you build something back there, there's going to be a great change to the topography of the land. And, you know, I have pictures from my backyard because I live on the end of Glen Park, which is it's a dead end, and then the backyard, my backyard is Penitentiary Glen on the other side. And so, like Jim had mentioned earlier, it's just the way that they would have to do the construction and the leveling of the land. It's even hard for me to even picture in my mind how it could be done without really dramatically affecting, you know, what's going to happen with the nature of the creek, the small creek that runs through my backyard, and subsequently runs into the east branch of the Chagrin River, which goes underneath the 306 bridge over there. And, you know, I have pictures and movies if anybody wants to see how, you know, at least after a rainstorm, how dramatic the creek does have some force there. So I don't know where these ponds that they're talking about, where the runoff of these properties are going to go to. You know, it sounded to me like, you know, just throw it in the back pond and then it'll throw down into this creek and just, it'll disappear, you know, and it's not going to do that. It's going to be something to, you know, that's going to affect the way that the nature is of the topography of the land. And that's probably my most biggest concern. I appreciate the fact they're looking out for the elderly in a place for them to go in Kirtland. And you know, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the way they did some of the construction up by across from the Menor Mall there, where it was, you know, Deepwood over there. Now that was a flat area, and there's still had, you know, like, you know, contingencies with drainage, even though that's a flat piece of land. And we're talking, you know, 100-foot ravines, you know, in the back there where this development's going to be. I don't even know how they're going to have to level, you know, all the land and everything. You know what it's like back there. And, you know, just, you know, me picturing that, I mean, and then the construction, you know, with, you know, the traffic that the construction's going to, you know, cause too, you know, as a lot of people that live up 306 from the Pinehurst and Barrister areas have mentioned, you know, the pulling out even from Glen Park sometimes is, you know, a little hairy because it changes from 35 to 25. And they do say, you know, speed's going to be reduced to 25. But, you know, that's going to be a concern, because even when that guy that's doing the construction up there on the west side of 306 now, you know, there were some vehicles pulling in and out of there. And can you imagine with the amount of traffic that the 30 houses are going to be from, you know, even the construction during that time too. So that's just something I'd like the council to take into consideration.
Thank you, sir. Any other residents?
First of all, I am a person who is currently downsizing my parents, who lived in Kirtland for 30 years, to a home. And I honestly, I mean, it's in Menor. That's where I found the new home. That's where I feel like this kind of thing is. And it's within a mile still of here, basically. So I still, even though I'm in that situation right now, I would not be for something like this. And the second thing is, if we were to rezone it and something would happen, that it would fall through and they would never be able, don't do the development, and whoever eventually buys the property would have that zoning now. And that's something to consider, because they could not put in the sewer and do real long bowling alley lots, so they could get the septic back there, 5 feet setback. You know what I'm saying? It could be really, somebody would be allowed to do it because that should be a zone, but it would look really funky. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mr. Lallo, changing zoning from R2 to R1, that isn't particular to just the owner that requested that. Would it carry on to anybody?
Correct. It carries on to that, to the property itself.
And the other question I had pertaining to the gentleman bringing up deed restrictions, keeping it from being rental. I don't know enough legally on that.
The only thing that I would recommend, he referenced getting an HOA, and you would put those prohibitions in the HOA documents.
Aren't HOAs generally, after 15, 20 years, generally fall apart quite often?
I don't know the answer to that one.
My example, though, of the zoning change or whatever, it wasn't a zoning change at the time, but of proposed development changing is how they cleared out all those trees to make those apartments, and then the cost was too much and that fell through. So we've seen it happen. That's all. I just want to be careful of that.
Thank you. Any other resident comments? Sir, if you'd like to address any of the questions or comments.
So
Oh,
to
sorry,
be
go
clear, we're closing the public portion of the hearing.
Okay.
Is that, last chance? Okay.
Okay, and then gentleman can speak on?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all for your input. It is recognized. There's been input throughout this process, and we've made tweaks, and many more tweaks, if this continues, will occur. So I appreciate it. I don't want anyone to think that what they said falls on deaf ears. I don't really know where to start, but I'm going to start kind of with just my memory. So I didn't say that the deed restriction would not allow for rentals, because I don't know if that's legal. What I said was the deed restrictions would be targeted at creating value homes that would not lend themselves to rentals, because that, I believe, is legal. I don't know the legality of, and you mentioned an HOA. Yeah, I don't know the legality, and I didn't want to say that, yeah. Next, and I don't have your names written down, sorry, but to your, one of your questions was the oxymoronic sentiment of creating deed restrictions for high-value homes and downsizing. I don't think downsizing necessarily means lower value homes. Menor was mentioned a few times, and I don't know much about the real estate in Menor, but I don't necessarily know that that's what we're targeting. I think you can downsize into a high-quality value home, and that's what we would be targeting. So I just want to clarify that. I think it's doable to have a smaller footprint, a smaller yard, less maintenance, less mowing, a lot of that, those things, but still maintaining Kirtland character, Kirtland quality. So that's all I would, that's kind of where the direction that I'm trying to go with that. Size of house, I don't have an answer. That was asked a few times. One thing I wanted to bring up, only because I heard it a lot, and I want to kind of create some delineation. A lot of the qualms about water runoff, there seems to be a lot of water runoff issues on the west side. A lot of the folks, and I didn't catch all the addresses, but I think the west side of 306, Barrister's Court and Pinehurst are the two addresses that I did hear. I want to make sure that that's that runoff isn't coming from this property. Not currently, not in the future. So they may have runoff issues that they want to talk to y'all about, but they're not coming from the property. So I just want to create a little bit of separation there, if that's fair, because that was brought up by quite a few people, but those issues, I don't, unless someone specifically said it's coming from this property, but it's not. So I just want to make sure of that. Flooding, traffic. Traffic was brought up, and did you mention that it was a request from the zoning?
Study, yes, I saw that in some of the documentation.
Yeah, so a traffic engineering firm has been selected. They've been put under contract. They've started their evaluation. At this point, so I put this out to a few traffic firms. I'll be honest with you, I didn't know there were traffic firms, but there's traffic engineers. I don't know if you are one, so I don't, no offense if you are one, but.
I'm an engineer.
So